Could that just put him over the edge?
I'm not too sure. I don't think they did well.
He's a bully.
I'm just so sick and tired. I'm hanging on a wire, a foot over the fire, and it's burning. I can feel it inside. Done with the same cliche. Done with the day after day. There's got to be a way. Now is the time to break the tide. I'll live, I'll die for what is wrong and what is right. I'll take the pain for all the ones without a name. To be invincible, we'll be invincible.
They still have a lot of holes to fill.
He didn't get fired. He didn't get fired. No, he didn't get fired. He never got his contract renewed.
Welcome, 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 everyone, to Two Guys in Hockey Talk. My name is Pawel the Cat with my beautiful co-host.
Hey, guys, it's
Evan Reynolds. Evan, how you doing?
Coming out. I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. I got to say, your intro, though, doesn't sound like you're that pumped on hockey right now. Maybe you're in a little travel mode?
Yes, I am in BC. I am traveling for a wedding, so I am excited to get out of the city. So I'm kind of on the road right now. How are things with you, Evan?
Hey, man, doing great. So in just a moment, we're going to have our guest headliner on. So Jesse from the Bar Down Beauties podcast is going to be joining us in just a moment. So we got lots of hockey to talk about. One team that we didn't get to focus on much this year. And so if you're with anyone right now, go ahead and get a share out. If you know any Minnesota Wild, we're going to talk about maybe there's not a lot happening, but there could be a lot of speculation that maybe we could just start up some new rumors here tonight. You never know. So anyway, man, playoffs, there's a lot of action. Just started up yesterday. I have a little rant around that I'd like to talk about a little later today. But, man, if you're ready, I'm ready for us to get started here with our guest headliner of the night.
Sounds good. Tonight's guest headliner brought to you by Penny Billionaires. You heard that rock alternate band. They are rocking him from Arizona, Penny Billionaires.
All right,
welcome,
guys,
Jesse,
I'd like to welcome Jesse from the Bar Down Beauties podcast. Jess, thanks so much for joining us over at Two Guys in Hockey Talk.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me. I'm glad you guys are finally focusing on the Minnesota Wild. We tend to be overlooked very often. The Minnesota Mild, as the fan base can refer to them, and I'm sure nationally that might get some attention too. But I'm excited to talk some hockey. It's been a while since we've had any on-ice action here in the state of hockey.
We appreciate you coming on the show. We want to talk all things Minnesota, but first, we want to know, where did your love of the game of hockey first emerge? Was there a moment in time or someone special in your life that showed you the game of hockey and you fell in love with it?
It's hard to avoid a love for hockey here in Minnesota. It sounds so cliche, right? But it really is the state of hockey for a reason. I'll be completely honest. For a long time, I never told this story, but now I'm owning it because I'm comfortable in who I am. I had a crush on a hockey boy. I was in about 7th grade. I went to the state high school hockey tournament, which is a big deal here in Minnesota. If you guys have not been, I highly encourage it. But I was crushing on the hockey guys. I was like, you know what? They're really cute. And then my senior year, I was stats girl for our varsity team. And I learned the ins and outs of hockey. And I was like, holy cow, this game's even cooler than the dudes that are playing it. So I kind of just fell in love. I love everything about the history of the game. I have found just such a passion for the storytelling of hockey players. Hockey players are the best, right? And the hockey community is the absolute best. So I really love being involved in that. And I'm so fortunate to have been able to do that with the NHL for quite a bit here, 9 seasons, and then Bar Down Beauties for the past 5. So it all started with that one crush, but I dropped the boy, kept the game, and here we are.
So you went from a boy crush to a game crush.
I think that's about it. I fell in love with the game of hockey, and I moved on from the love of the hockey guys. I mean, they're still all right to hang out with, but I laugh. It was forever, right? Because I didn't want to have that like narrative, but at the same time, like that's the truth, though. I think we've all been there, right? That's what happened. It was that hockey flow. That's what really got me.
So let's get into the Minnesota Wild. You know, not the season you guys wanted. There's been a lot of changes, overhaul. I personally have some questions about Bill Guerin because when he came in, he seemed like he really wanted to make changes, although he was kind of hand-tied. But really, what are your thoughts on this past season? Where do they go forward from this? And how do you give Kirill Kaprizov some more help in order for them to be able to be competitive?
A lot of great questions and a lot to dive into there. I mean, Minnesota missing the playoffs, to me, was not a surprise. I think there was a lot of turbulence this year, a lot of ups and downs, obviously a ton of injuries, too, that did not help. And as you'd mentioned, Bill Guerin handcuffed by his own doing, courtesy of the buyouts of Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. And this year was one of the big hard hits where he had no money to play with, barely enough money to make recalls from the American Hockey League in Iowa when those injuries struck. Just not a great season. And it really showed the depth or lack thereof that Minnesota has right now. And again, it's going to be one more season of just that as those Parise and Suter buyouts hit again next year. Bill Guerin again kind of strangled. There's only a couple guys that'll probably walk in UFA: Alex Goligoski, Dakota Murmis, Jake Lucchini. Otherwise, everybody else is pretty stuck in place. So what you see is what you get, which unfortunately doesn't give a lot of support for, as you mentioned, Kirill Kaprizov, the Calder Cup champ. Still had a phenomenal year. He came into the season, according to most, and even Kirill kind of admitted it. He tiptoed around in his Russian dance there. But he was hurt, I think, the beginning of this year. I don't think he had a full off season of training. He didn't play the way he was. His edge work, which is usually his strong suit, really struggled. And obviously when Kirill's not going, the team's not going. The nice thing is you did see positives out of Jules Eriksson. You saw Matt Boldy continue on his transcendence, and Marco Rossi, a first-round overall pick, finally came into his own. So there was a little bit of good. Unfortunately for Minnesota, not enough to, again, make that playoff push. Firing Dean Ebbson was another situation that I think had to be done. But I do look forward to see what John Hines can do next year with a full year under his belt and see what Bill Guerin might be able to wrangle this offseason, starting with the draft coming up here next week.
Okay.
Well, you do got to wonder about Bill Guerin because he's really good at holding his cards tight that you don't hear a lot. Some of the buyouts even, there was very little known until it started happening. Sometimes things get out, but I am interested because I just can't see them standing pat. I wonder, so maybe it's explain to us a little bit around Boldy, because that's who you were just mentioning on. Where do you see his progression this year, his place on the team? Because last year was really his coming out party.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, 49 sheets, as Ryan Reeves affectionately referred to him when he signed that 7x7. We loved it, just yelling it across the locker room. Matt Boldy was a guy that came in pretty highly touted. I know a lot of the Wild fan base was disappointed that they passed on Cole Caulfield and went for Boldy. I loved the draft pick going back to a couple years ago in that first round. Boldy was very inconsistent, and there was still a level of inconsistency for him this year, but I think he finally removed some of that pressure. I think last year, especially after he signed that hefty contract, it said, hey, man, you are a core piece of this team. And I'm not sure if he was ready for that. You got to remember, Matt Boldy's 22 years old, right? It's very rare for a guy to come in and be able to hold that, especially here in Minnesota, where this fan base is dying for some sort of success. They are just begging for something to hold on to. And Matt Boldy looks to be that guy. Again, a level of consistency this year that I think was great. Now, it's tough to find consistency when the lines are constantly kind of getting moved around. And that was another thing that had to be tried this year, is trying to figure out what pieces worked. I think you found a really good level of success with him and Jules Eriksson. I think Jules Eriksson helps bring out the best in Matt Boldy, not only in his scoring ability, because Matt Boldy obviously can do that, but that physicality. That was an element. You saw Matt Boldy really increase there, and that's something that Jules Eriksson, that net front presence, that big body, Matt Boldy finally was able to use some of his size and really counter that a little bit. So I think that's where he really came into his own this year. He continued on his scoring pace, which is great, his playmaking ability and his stick handling, which has always been tremendous. But to see him add that physical element and a little bit more of that two-way hockey, I think just further proved that he's continuing to mature into his game, and I expect only good things to come.
Well, Ray is chiming in and says, "Good luck with John Hines. Wait until he starts switching with the idea of switching with lines." I guess maybe your thoughts on John Hines coming in as a coach, and is this the right hire? Because I like Dean Everson, but I also thought he reminded me a lot of the character from The Office, Creed, and I was just
Creed.
like, that's
Yes.
all he ever looked like, just like. Which I feel like Dean Everson will get a job somewhere else in the NHL. But your thoughts on him, John Hines coming in, and what he has been able to do in the past, and what you're expecting of him.
Dean was hilarious, and I think that was where it came to be bittersweet. I mean, I have seen just Bruce Boudreau and Dean Evison in my tenure with the NHL and covering this team, so I had built kind of a good relationship with Dean. He knew he looked like Creed, and I remember we had Freddie Gaudreau on the podcast, and he was like, I remember my friend saying, "What's up with your coach, man? He looks scary. Like, why does he look like that?" He's like, "I don't know. That's just Dean." He has very intense eyes, right? No, I mean, you can't, as Bill Guerin very openly admitted, you can't fire 26 guys, right? And that was the case. It wasn't Dean Evson's fault, but somebody had to fall on that sword, and he was the one to do it. Now, bringing John Hines in, it wasn't the sexy hire, right? To me, John Hines hasn't achieved a lot that I'm going to be like, yes, let's go. This is great. This is fantastic. He's had his ups and downs. He hasn't been able to take Nashville or New Jersey to the promised land by any stretch of the imagination. And it felt a little bit like, which tends to be Bill Guerin's way, kind of that good old boys club. He's got the USA background, right? He's got the Boston background. So I think that was probably, there's that familiarity. And obviously he goes back to Wilkes-Barre as well with Bill Guerin. But as the year progressed, and as John Hines was finally able to put his fingerprints all over the team, you saw a lot of good. I mean, there were stretches, I think it was, 11 straight games with points or something like that. I mean, they went on some really good runs, and they certainly kept things interesting up until the end, courtesy of John Hines kind of playing around with some different things and figuring it out. That's why I think I'm extra excited to see. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, right? I do want to see John Hines and what he can do, because knowing his pedigree with NTDP and the younger players in particular, Minnesota's going to have to lean on some of these young guys, finally, hopefully, please. Bill, let the young kids play. And I think that's where John Hines' strength could be. That's where Dean Evson's strength was supposed to be, again, having a long career in the AHL. I think John Hines might have a little bit more ability to reach and connect to those guys. So, again, I think it'll be great to have him from the get-go in training camp, have some familiarity with these guys that are coming back for another year, and see what he can do. I would have loved Peter Laviolette. I would have loved to bring back Bruce Boudreau, but we can't get everything we want, guys.
So Jake's got a comment.
And before Evan asks his next question. Yeah. So Jake's got a comment. So it's kind of a multifaceted question, but it goes, is this an off-season for the Wild where they address defense or special teams, both PK and power play? And will Gustafsson have a bigger year than next year, especially given that the flower, Marc-Andre Fleury, is coming up on 40 years of age, and he can only do so much. And he's indicated he wants to re-sign there. But your thoughts on the special teams, defense, and goaltending for Minnesota?
Special teams was atrocious. I know a lot of teams can say that about their year, and some of them are even playing for a cup final, right? But Minnesota got rid of assistant coach Darby Hendrickson, who has been with the organization since his playing days. He has been an assistant on the bench under every coach except Jacques Lemaire, and that's because he was playing for Jacques Lemaire. So he has had quite the longevity. He must have known where some bodies are buried. Love Darby, but he was let go. And his specialty, special teams and face-off, an area that Minnesota has not been notoriously very good at. So they absolutely need to address that. I think Declan Chisholm getting a look at the running point on the power play and the PK has been really good. Jared Spurgeon coming back, who missed the majority of this year with injury, I think is going to be huge for that PK. I think giving Murat Huznadinov another look too. He's another guy that's supposed to be exceptional on special teams. So I'm excited to see that. And whoever they bring in as their next assistant coach to see what kind of looks and plays that he can do. I think that'll be incredibly important. On the defensive side, as I mentioned, having Spurge back is great. You've kind of got your core four back there, right? Brock Faber, absolutely phenomenal. Give that man the Calder next week. If he does not win Calder, I blasphemy. I'm sorry, Connor Bedard, but Brock Faber was everything and more, averaging about 30 minutes a night. Absolutely incredible. Jake Middleton, there's been rumors and discussion that maybe he looks at an extension. He is a free agent next season. He looked like a pretty good pickup from San Jose for Bill Guerin. He's been eating a lot of minutes. And then Jonas Brodin, who is one of the more underrated defensemen, I think, in the league, who's just a constant patrolling the blue line. So your core four are there. Where it gets sticky, icky, and really gross, if I might add, is that bottom pairing. I'm not sure what that looks like. As I mentioned, Alex Goligoski, he is going to walk. I can't imagine Bill Guerin brings him back. Dakota Murm is probably another one. You do have Declan Chisholm, which was a great waiver wire pickup off of waivers from the Winnipeg Jets. He looks really solid, but it's kind of looking at what do you do with that other pair. They have John Merrill, who is John Merrill for all intents and purposes. I also think that they're probably going to come knocking and looking at free agency and seeing what they can get, again, on the cheap. It doesn't seem that Minnesota brass has been very thrilled with the development of the defenseman down in the AHL, so it's hard for me to imagine any of those guys coming up. So I think Billy G will be taking a little peek-see at the free agent market. There's a familiar guy named Matt Dumba who is very polarizing here, but I know Bill Guerin loves him, and he'd be very, very cheap, so I think he's somebody worth looking at possibly. Again, looking at something that's very affordable for Minnesota. And Philip Gustafson. The big question on Philip Gustafson is, will they look at moving him? The problem with Gus is he's a second-tier goalie. We saw what Markstrom got, right? And there's so many other goaltenders out there that I think are much more appealing than a Philip Gustafson, especially coming off a bad year. I don't hate the idea of rolling back with Flower and Gus as the tandem. Marc-Andre Fleury, for his age, did phenomenal, I thought, this year, given that he wasn't expected to start as many games as he did, because Philip Gustafson just really, really struggled. And it seems to be the same problems with Gus each year, is that he doesn't take kind of his diet and physical plan into action like he should. I know Bill Guerin has mentioned that very openly to us media members, that that's his problem, is he doesn't dial it in when he needs to. So I think if Bill Guerin can trade Gus for something worthwhile, why not do it? Because they have Jesper Velstead, who is the top goalie prospect, who will be absolutely phenomenal. Is he ready for the NHL? Maybe. I think he could be. Who better to learn under than Marc-Andre Fleury, though? So Gus, we'll see. He signed that 3-year extension last year, so there's a little bit of weight to that. I think he's at like $375 on that per year. But I would like to see him maybe moved. Again, don't hate it if he comes back, as long as he doesn't stink like he did this year.
So interesting that you say that, Jess. So I've been hearing some of the rumblings just around that Bill potentially trying to clear up some of that cap space because of where the Wild are in their development right now, because they have Fleury for the mentoring process, and that if they can move Gustin, that they likely will. And if you think about it, it's not a really strong market right now for goaltending. And a lot of players, like we just saw Markstrom go, and we know that Markstrom has an on-year, off-year, on-year, off-year. And, you know, very potentially, I mean, you could be looking at something like that for Gustafson too. You know, especially for a team that needs to pick something else up here that has some cap space. They're not worried. It's not that high, but you got to wonder if that's a potential a market that for him that might be quiet. But I think that if they could just clear that cap space, they'd probably be happy.
I think so. I mean, again, Bill Guerin saw firsthand, and I don't think the buyouts were never a bad move. I really don't believe that. I think that was the correct thing to do at the time. Bill Guerin made the right call. I don't think he realized just how tight money was going to be. And again, you can't predict the future and say, oh, Jared Spurgeon's going to get hurt, Marcus Foligno's going to get hurt, Matt Zuccarello. I mean, you cannot at all predict the amount of guys that were injured this year all at once at all. But at the same time, I think he realized firsthand, like, holy cow, we have no money to do anything. Like, we have to move all these guys to LTIR. We have to do this, this, and this. So I think now that he knows exactly what that looked like, it'll give him a better plan going into, again, the second and final year of that big chunk of 14-8 against the cap on those buyouts.
So then moving forward, what is someone that they should be targeting this offseason? Is it more defense-based? Is it a goaltender if they can find something? We know that Markstrom went today. You know, there's been some trades already happening. Would it be a goal scorer like a Nikolai Ehlers who's looking for a fresh start out of Winnipeg, but you're remaining in the Central there, or looking for somebody else just to put that depth piece in, or, you know, bargain bin finding where you find these guys that are $1 million, 1.5 or under to your team so that they can contribute in big ways, you know, and you're looking at a Connor Brown right now for an Edmonton, you know, who, you know, has really found his legs after the surgery last year and has really been able to play. What does Bill Guerin focus on first? And what do they draft? Do you know tentatively where he's looking at?
Give me Cole Iserman, man. Give me him. I hope he falls down. I mean, I don't know. I always have a tough time with the draft only because it's so hard to predict the future, right? It's not the NFL where you're not going to see these guys. I mean, not everybody's a Connor Bedard that's just going to hop right in at 18 years old. No, but I think that's a really good question looking at this offseason. Bill Guerin loves to bargain bin shop, and he has to. Again, I believe last I checked, they've got about, with the cap going up, they've got about $6.8 million to spend, which isn't a lot. And that's given if they don't re-sign anybody, if they don't give any extensions out, and if they don't trade anybody. That's just as it sits. And like I said, the majority of this team is locked into place because Bill Guerin also loves to give his no moves and no trades out like candy to every single person. My biggest thing for Bill Guerin, I would love to find some depth scoring. As I mentioned, you saw the struggle. If Kirill's line wasn't going, you weren't getting any scoring from anybody. Once you'd obviously see maybe Matt Zuccarello or Matt Boldy obviously chip in a little bit too, but still there was a lot of struggle for those third and fourth lines to get going, which sure you can say is to be expected, but you need something there. You need absolutely anything. My biggest concern though, I don't want any old guys. And I say that as kind as I can because I am myself, I'm old. Like I recognize their players that keep being associated with the Wild. I'm like, he's too old. Well, he's like my age. So here we are talking about that. No, I either want to give the young guys in the organization a shot or get a young, unproven guy in here and see what he can do. I'm done with the David Perrons, and I'm done with kind of those guys who are on their third and fourth leg. David Perron's the one that keeps getting connected. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. We don't need any more vets in that locker room. So I would focus on that. I think definitely left wing. I would love to get more left wings to see Marcus Johansson get less playing time. He's another player that's here with Minnesota that I would love for them to move if they could. I don't think they're going to be able to because
the center that can't play center.
So bad. It's so bad to watch, guys. I'm telling you, Pavel, I can't do it in another year. I'm just pulling. I
saw it in Washington. I was like, oh, they need a center. Well,
but you know what? Here's the thing about Marcus. When it's a contract year, he decides to play because certainly did that last year before the Minnesota Wild gave him their re-upped him. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is his thing. So maybe this year it's his best year ever. I don't know. But yeah, he's a tough go. So I'd love to see anybody come in to reduce his playing time. And as I mentioned, defense I think would be good, but you're going to have to do some shopping. There's a saying here in Minnesota that's in Bill Guerin we trust because Bill Guerin has found a way to pull out some magic from his hat each and every season that he's been in charge of this team. So it'll be another interesting, hopefully, offseason, just as long as we're not extending a bunch of old men.
So just coming back, because you're talking, so they're drafting 13th overall.
Yep.
If you have Carter Yakimchuk, I'm just like looking at kind of where I'm essentially looking at players potentially in a mock. You could potentially, I know there's a lot of talk about Konsta Helenius, who actually is considered not great at one particular thing, but great at everything, and could potentially, because he's been playing with men already, step in already. Or Carter Yakimchuk, but he's a right-hand D, but he's at 6'3", and you got Konsta at 5'11", but maybe ready. Do you think that they would go for a D in that kind of case, or do you think they would go for the forward and maybe look at plugging him in right away?
I mean, it really could go either way. I love the idea of both of that, right? Like, I think, because the other thing you consider back on D, they're desperate for size. Jared Spurgeon, as I'd mentioned, Brock Faber and Jake Middleton have some size, and Broads is kind of in the middle, but they are desperate for some size back there. And Jared Spurgeon's career, we don't know what that's going to look like, right? We don't know what he's going to look like coming back from the surgery, and he's getting on the older end of things as well, as I'd mentioned. I would personally love to see a guy that they can plug right in. And again, that will help Bill Guerin tremendously when it comes to that salary cap, right? If you can get a guy that you're going to draft and you're ready to do this. Now, that's just me speaking. I never know, because I certainly don't like to rush, and Bill Guerin's very adamant that he doesn't want to rush anybody into the NHL, which I think is completely smart, right? You look at guys like Boldy, you look at guys like Rossi, like they've gotten to this because they took their time, right? There's a process to it. But I'm desperate for show me something, Minnesota Wild. Just show me a little bit. I just don't want them to swing and miss in the draft. I think that's the biggest thing. And thankfully the Wild have Judd Brackett, who has done a tremendous job in scouting and getting some of these guys. So I have a lot of faith in him as the head of amateur scouting. And I think, to answer the question, they'll probably go defense. They're going to go defense. That's what I think.
Especially if it's larger, right?
Yeah,
if they can go big and give that year or two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they are, because they're just like, I think they're a little scared about the defensive prospects. Like, I just don't think they're quite there yet.
Fair.
Now, I do want to turn my attention a little bit to the PWHL because it was an exciting inaugural season for Minnesota, albeit quite a roller coaster of emotions with Boston in that final, I'm sure. And with, Minnesota, the Wild not making the playoffs and the Timberwolves, struggling in that second round versus the Mavericks. How excited and how much fun has it been for Minnesotans for the fact that the women's win their first inaugural Walter Cup and just the excitement around the game of hockey for women growing there?
Yeah, I mean, you had to run through all those heartbreaks first. Don't forget the Vikings falling out of favor again. No, just kidding. It's a Minnesota sports situation, right? No, women get it done here in Minnesota. The Minnesota Lynx have won their fair share of national championships as well. So I always like to joke that that's just what happens. That's the way of the women. It was incredible. I went to that inaugural game, and I love seeing, the young girls who get to now look up to these players, right? But even more so, the older women that you could just feel how much this meant to them. They're playing at XL Energy Center. There were 14,000 people there. I still get goosebumps just thinking about it. That energy was absolutely electric. And Minnesota started out hot. And then they completely did a Minnesota thing and fell apart at the end and backed right into those playoffs. They had come in losing 5 straight, lost the first 2 to Toronto, looked like they were going to get swept in the best of 5, but managed to pull it out. It was very heartbreaking. At that game 4 in Minnesota with 13,000 people. Billie Jean King's there. She's doing her thing. And Minnesota loses 1 rip in double overtime, but end up pulling it out in Boston. A ton of fun. It's just been a ton of fun. It's funny, I joked with other media members as the league was kind of running through their championship protocol, like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's what media does. And I was like, well, we don't know that because we're Minnesota media. We've never covered a championship. Like, we're not sure what we're supposed to do. So no, it was really, really exciting. Women's hockey in general as a whole continues to grow, which I think is just absolutely fantastic. And I think the league did a lot of things right, which makes it feel like it's not just a drop in the bucket, right? Like, it makes it feel like there is something sustainable here. I've been around for iterations of professional hockey. Here in Minnesota, the Whitecaps won their inaugural Isabel Cup when that was with the NWHL, and the Whitecaps were an independent league in the CHL. So there's been a whole bunch of professional hockey options here for a while in Minnesota, but this is the first one that really had the full feel, the full vibe, and a large credit of that goes to now former general manager Natalie Darwitz. That would probably be the one big kind of, did they do this right? Did they not do this right? Getting rid of your general manager after you win a championship seems a little odd. But all in all, I'm excited to see what next year brings for not only the Minnesota team, but the league itself.
Yeah. So we're going to go into a wrap. Our time's already come up here. What I'd like to do, though, is just so everyone knows, so Jess is part of the Bar Down Beauties podcast with Kirsten. So maybe just tell us a little bit about the podcast and what you guys do even outside of the podcast.
Yeah, Kirsten Kroll, my co-host, she's the in-arena host for all Minnesota Wild games. So her and I are at all the home games and decided to use kind of our spunkin' personality and female voice and breakdowns to just talk hockey. We started this 5 years ago, and I've loved it ever since. I remember the first episode, I was like, who's going to listen to this? Nobody wants to hear what I have to say. And it's turned out really fun. It's also a really fun way to get some of the players on, especially in the off season, and just kind of shoot the, that thing with the guys and get to know them, because I think as a female, we can have different discussions than maybe some males. That's the one thing I will lean on. Like, I'm a mom, so is Marcus Foligno's got kids, and we can lean on that and have a little bit more fun, or talk Taylor Swift. That's my co-host's favorite thing. So we've got weekly episodes that drop new each and every Tuesday. There is hockey breakdowns, our opinions. We're talking Stanley Cup finals. Right now, we'll get into the draft and free agency. I'm excited for hockey to get back into swing where Minnesota can be in the mix again, because being off since May has been a very, very long time.
Well, we know you're looking for a Taco Bell sponsorship, and probably someone out there right now who's working for Taco Bell listens to us. So guys, reach out to Jessie or her colleague and make sure you get them that Taco Bell sponsorship.
Appreciate that.
And I also believe you guys trying to get to Vegas. You're doing a GoFundMe?
Yes, we're gonna move that. We were gonna go to Vegas, and then something came up for my co-host schedule, but we have a GoFundMe to travel. We're either gonna go to Nashville or Dallas next year. It's one of those 2 away games. There's a lot of hatred toward Dallas in Minnesota. I'm not sure if you guys would be aware of that, but it's not positive
Seems
here.
odd. Seems odd to me.
I know, it doesn't
don't know
make
why. I
any
can't put my
sense.
pulse on it.
It makes no sense at all. So I'm thinking Dallas is where we're going.
All right, so guys, get out there. Go on to the
And Ray
GoFundMe.
asks, I think it was.
Go ahead.
Tuesdays.
Go ahead, Pavel.
Go ahead, Evan. Tuesday. I was going to say
Yeah.
Tuesdays, Ray. It's on Tuesdays. You can find it. And I'm
Tuesday.
guessing all your local Spotify places.
Oh, yep. Spotify, Apple.
Amazon,
We've got
Spotify, all
YouTube.
that.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, we got 3 shows left. We're a little bit more fortunate. We run about 42, 43 shows on the year. So we end after the free agency frenzy for the NHL, and we start up right after the September long weekend. So we do get a little bit more time off, fortunately. But we will throw that out there for you, as well as throw it up on some of our pages, guys. Let's try and get them out there. Let's go fund them and take advantage of that and support the Bar Down Beauties podcast.
Appreciate you, boys.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. We wish you all the best. Good luck in the off season, although it's not really an off season for you since you're working 24/7.
I know, right? That's what we try. We still get out on the golf course and the lake plenty. Don't worry.
Sweet.
That's amazing.
All
Well,
right.
thank you so much.
Thanks so much. We greatly appreciate it. Again, guys, go check them out. Bar Down Beauties podcast.
All right, Evan, that was a wonderful interview. Thank you so much to Jesse for taking the time to connect with us this evening. We appreciate it. Now let's get into it because we've got a lot of hockey news to cover. Where do you want to start?
Okay, well, I know everyone's been talking. Why don't we do this? I know there's been some trades and stuff going on. I know Ray has been on, so let's just cover some of the people that we've been brought out. Why don't we go into a couple of the trades and the potential things or rumors going around? And because Ray was there, why don't we talk? You want to hit in on what happened today or yesterday, with Markstrom and the Devils?
For sure. So as it stands right now, it looks like Markstrom is heading over to New Jersey with 31.25% retention for the agreement for another 2 years. And in return, defensive prospect Kevin Pawel and a 2025 first-round draft pick, top 10 protected, going over to Calgary. Your thoughts, Evan, on the trade?
Well, it's funny because there was the rumor that they were going to get potentially the Devils' first-round draft pick this last. I don't think it was ever on the table, that draft pick for Markstrom for the end of the season there. They were just too tight fighting for a playoff spot at that place. But you know what? There is a little bit of a gamble with this because Markstrom has good seasons and bad seasons, generally speaking. But you know what? I believe the Devils' system, the way they coach, and the kind of team, and the Markstrom to me plays better when he doesn't have the same kind of pressure from the hockey community the same. Then that's not taking away from the passion. We know guys like Ray, they have a ton of fully passionate, full-packed arenas that are crazy. But, when you're in a Canadian market sometimes, that's a lot. And I do think this is going to resemble like him playing in Sweden and stuff with his good crowds and places. And I think he's going to be more settled. And right now, Markstrom wants to prove everyone wrong. He wants to win. And right now, what team could he go to that would be in a better position to get out there and to win? So you got to give hands off to this one. What was your initial thought?
I'll give it in a sec. So Ray says this was the best deal they were going to make. All they gave up was a protected draft pick and Ball, who I think would be seen the best from. This leaves $60 million to sign another defenseman and forward to win all around. I think it's an even trade both ways. Slight edge maybe to New Jersey because they do get a bona fide number one goalie for 2 more years because he's 34. But that's not to say we just talked about Marc-Andre Fleury, who can play on an elite level. And really, Calgary is kind of retooling on the fly. So really, New Jersey wants to be competitive next year. Granted, barring any injuries.
Yeah.
So I like this deal for both teams. New Jersey didn't really give up too much of their stock, and Calgary has Dustin Wolf ready. He's no longer playing in the AHL like he's already done. He's achieved a great success.
Yeah, they got Vladar there to be that back.
Nick Rickerton says the worst kept hockey secret in the world. He also had a few questions earlier, which I just wanted to quickly address. So he's asking if Carter Hart was done. The one thing with Carter Hart, as people know, is he is still on hiatus, just like the 4 other players in that scandal. When the trial goes forward this fall, technically he's an RFA, but my understanding is that these teams will have the right to hold on to their rights even after whatever verdict comes out. So if they are found not guilty in a few years' time when the case is done, they would essentially return back to the teams, or the rights would still remain with the teams with the Philadelphia Flyers. He was also asking about Jeremy Colleton. He abruptly balked at the Canucks offer to stay in Abbotsford because he was supposed to be the front runner for San Jose. Agreed. He will definitely probably get a job. The problem is, Evan, is there's so many good head coach jobs, or so few head coach jobs right now, and so many good candidates. You look at what's available, and a lot of positions are filling up. And so really, you got to take your job where you can. And sometimes you got to become an assistant before you can become a head coach. You look at Guy Boucher, who was brought in Toronto as a power play specialist. Didn't work out. He got let go. It didn't pan out in Toronto, but he was looking potentially at becoming a head coach again after his stint in Ottawa. So there's definitely going to be some moves. Now Zylstra says, don't know why the Markstrom deal did get done at the trade deadline. Honestly, it's hard to say. I mean, they did get Jake Allen, but they have their tandem now, and I think it's a good tandem.
Yeah, I actually think it was because that first round, I think it was the second round that was being offered as the behind-the-scenes things, and they didn't talk to Markstrom up front, so that caused a little bit of a chaos, and I think that they thought that they would get more. A lot of people in the know actually were saying how they'd get a better deal in the offseason than they would actually get in the season. So, who knows?
And yes, I did get a haircut. I finally cut off the locks, so I am down to being left gone.
Okay, let me just quickly come into the Flames. If you're a Flames fan, you're saying, okay, I lost Markstrom. I think there was a better deal in the summer. I mean, that's all hypothetical. It's funny, though, because a lot of people said, oh, that never really happened. Then we found out there was a bit of a problem because Markstrom wasn't aware that his name was mentioned out there. It kind of was the beginning of the end, and everyone kind of knew that. So I think a lot of Flame fans are ready to move on. They've seen the rebuild. They saw Tanev leave. They saw Hannafin leave. They got rid of Lindholm. They got rid of it. I mean, they have really changed that team over. But let me just, for those that don't know Kevin Ball, Kevin Ball is 6'6". This is the defenseman. He played on Jersey's second pairing last year, and they consider him a wrecking ball, and he is only 23 years old. So I think they wanted something. They can move the puck, but do you have a guy that can hold? That was where Tanev was, right? Yeah. And let's face it, if Markstrom stayed in Calgary, that team is going to have a lot more high-quality chances coming in on them probably this year while they're going to the rebuild. So, in essence, at first I wasn't sure, but looking at this, you know what? It's a top 10 protected. I don't think Jersey's going to fall that low again. I think you're probably looking that you're probably, if they don't make the playoffs, I don't know, guys like Ray are going to say, what? Worst case, you're going to be looking at like a 12th overall. Worst case, best case for the Calgary, but you could be looking at potentially a top 8. So you might be around 26. That it could be as low as, but still, it's a first round draft pick, and that's hard to come by nowadays.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Again, we're going to see what's going to happen, but Ray says problem with Ball was the system here. Playing the poke type first defenseman caused him to take a lot of penties. Yeah, but you can get that out of your game. That's something that you can train out of. So
you think so?
I mean, yeah, with the right system, right? You look at what it is.
Do you remember Ladislav Smid?
I do.
Yeah, you couldn't get. He did the stinky glove afterwards. He cross-checked people. He'll tell. It was just in him. That's a hard habit. Your neural pathways develop habits in these players, and it's hard to get out of. Ethan Morrow, dumb penalties after the plays. I don't know. I hear you, but I wonder if they can actually change that part. So
now the other big trade that we heard today is Darcy Kemper heading to LA. Or Pierre-Luc Dubois, straight up to hockey trade, Cheers. 1-for-1. The Washington Capitals get their center that I guess they've been looking for, and the LA Kings get their goaltender with their David Riddick backing up. Big save, Dave. Now, you wonder, Evan, is this a good trade for both teams? What are your thoughts on this? And what were your thoughts on Rob Blake's comments about how he indicated that it wasn't a good fit and the system was not right for Pierre-Luc Dubois?
Honestly, I worry for Blake now. I worry if he's going to be able to actually come out of this because I did a breakdown. Essentially, they traded Velarde, Iafola, Capuri, the 37th overall for Darcy Kemper, and 1 year of 40 points from PLD. So and we talk about how goalies, like I get it, he tried to salvage something to move ahead. It's probably the best deal that he could go with. And PLD maybe could excel over in Washington with some of those guys that are more, when I say excel, he is a good two-way player. That is something I will give him. I actually think PLD is like a Lindholm player. I think that he will work better in a system like the Capitals have. I think that they also had him too much in a shutdown role with the way the Kings were playing last year because they didn't want to change from when Todd left coaching. So I think the Capitals are trying to figure a way to be relevant while Ovechkin's got his contract. That's what I think. And they'll figure something because I don't know. They're good at finding goaltenders. And then for the Kings, they need a goalie. Not sure Kemper is that goalie, but they can buy out that contract or trade it out much easier than PLD. So this, I give the edge to the Los Angeles Kings. But you know what? Who knows? This could be a deal. Right now, I say a 70-30 benefit to the Kings on this deal.
I agree. They kind of got under this contract just before the July 1st, as Ray indicated that the no trade kicks in. Jordan indicates that as he told me earlier in our chat, that you're trading shit for poop. Sorry, Cats and Kings fan. And Zilstra finally agrees with Jordan, which we never get if you guys follow the show. So clearly the moons have aligned. I agree. I think it's just kind of a weird take. I mean, I think that contract should have never been signed. I worry, given how slow Capitals are, that it's going to be tough to compete. Now, they do have Dylan Strome still, but really, Obi's getting older. Can they compete, Evan? Or, was this year kind of a blip with them being able to get into the playoffs, even though they had one of the worst minus differential, plus minus? So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And will we see Dubois set up Obi, as Zilstra indicated?
So that's interesting. Go ahead. Yeah, you're reading the comments for the.
Oh yeah. So speaking of contract, that shouldn't be signed. What is Vancouver doing? So we could talk about Philip Hronek.
We'll come there in a minute. I just want to mention, I actually think by next off season, I think you're looking at Blake being gone. So that'll be a tough one for the ownership to do. But I think Blake will be gone, or they'll move him like they done in Edmonton with other people in positions. They move them into roles above and beyond in operations of some sort, and they still pay them other ways. I think they need someone else with a different hockey mind to come back in. And there are some people I'm hearing rumored, but I don't want to mention any of the three until I see what rolls out between now, because there's a lot of fast action going on. So, okay, yes, let's go to it. What's the question around Vancouver? Because I did want to talk about them too.
So there's still a lot of things up in the air, but they have essentially signed themselves out of Dakota Joshua and Nikita Zadorov, but they did sign Philip Hronek for a 7.25 by 8-year contract. So a little bit high, but I think a fairly well, for me personally, well-priced contract. But your thoughts on Philip Hronek staying for 8 more years with Vancouver and Quinn Hughes having a partner?
Yeah, I think that he's gelled well. It's a good fit for him. I'm a little concerned about the winning attitude that they ran into with the media afterwards, after their loss in the finals. He was a little snippy, with it afterwards. But, who knows? I mean, you've just gone through a lot of hard, tough times, and you've given everything. I do not believe that they put themselves out of the Zadorov. I think Zadorov has put himself out, unfortunately, because of his asking range, and it's far too high. Otherwise, they might be able to. And that also is a reason why it's expected that that Myers, when they do a re-sign eventually down the road here, it could be a 3.5 next year, the year after, or whatever it is. So that could be an interesting deal too.
Well, Jordan says Vancouver has way too many UFAs, so I think you're looking at the most important summer for the Canucks in franchise history. And Zilstra indicated that Alvin and Rutherford are going to ruin the Canucks. I mean, they did help pick up some good pieces. It's just the problem is you gave up a bit to lose, in the second round, but you did take it to the second round. Well, this is what she says. So I think they had a good season. I think they can
I
build
think
off
they
this.
came from no playoffs. They had no
Yeah.
playoffs the year before.
Yeah. So I think they did very well. I think the problem
Yeah.
is watch them in on Gensel potentially, as well as
Yes.
Brett Pesci is someone they would consider, or Martin Natchez.
So let's just say I think the only way Getzel signs in Vancouver is if they offer the highest amount of money. I do not see Getzel actually. I think he would prefer to be on an American team. That's just a few things that I've heard from those.
Does he go back to Pittsburgh?
No, that is signed, sealed, and delivered. It is not going to happen again, unfortunately. That one is too bad because I think they'd like to find a way. But I mean, the talk is it's going to be between $8.5 and $9.5 million. So
now the other two teams that we can talk to things is that Barclay Goodrow of the New York Rangers,
San Jose Sharks.
He's been claimed off by San Jose. He's not happy with the fact that they waived him, as he had 6 goals in 16 games in the postseason. So he was performing. Stanley Cup champion, championship pedigree, great leadership skills. He's going over there, and Mike Greer also doing a little bit of work with picking up Ty Dellandrea from the Dallas Stars for a 2025 fourth round pick from Winnipeg. Your thoughts on what San Jose is doing and how they're building up, given that they potentially could take Celebrini in the first round?
I like that. Celebrini and Celebrini. They're going to celebrate with Celebrini. Yeah, well, and it's interesting because it's already been noted that Will Smith now is going to be with the team. So he's fighting for a position. We all know he's good enough on that team right now to join. So you're looking, Macklin, he's the number one. He would have been on Team Canada had they not decided to go with the vets. I wish I could have saw him play there, but probably wise for him not, so he doesn't get injured before his draft. But Macklin, Celebrini, and Will Smith probably lining up next year. They need somebody there to kind of help around, mentor them. Good veteran, good tough guy. In the playoffs, that's where Goodrow was incredible for the Rangers. They had no choice. They're up against cap issues that they got to fight with. Dellandrea, I thought in the Edmonton series, I mean, he got one of those goals down coming on and sniping that thing in. I actually think that was a bad move by Dallas, especially because they really got nothing. It was just an onload. I think that's a really good move. So I like these moves that they have. And so bringing in Goodrow, they have the money. They're not worried about the dollars right now. That'll deal with itself. They didn't take on and hold a lot of money outside of those 2 contracts they're dealing with Burns and Carlson. And so that's going to be done in a few years. And so when they're done with that, they're going to be at that stage now where they're going to need the salary. And the salary cap, we know, is just going up each year for the next 3 years. It's going to be crazy. So they're going to be able to pay these guys really well. So I look for them to make one more swing, by the way. But I think for a good, solid veteran player, so that the Macklin Celebrini is not left like the dog. Like they brought in Hall and
Foligno and Corey Perry at the time, and a few.
And
others.
I think the same idea.
And Jason
is
Dickinson.
Happening. Yeah, I think they're doing the same. That's what he's doing in San Jose. So I like the moves. I like the moves. They're going to make more interesting for those fans to have a reason to get excited again. They're used to winning, and so it's been hard for them the last couple of years.
Well, and they did just hire a new coach, and so that's definitely going to be an impactful after letting go of David Quinn. So they're definitely looking at someone who can inspire and motivate these young guys and really mold them into proper full-time NHLers.
How much time we got left here, bud?
We got about 12 minutes.
Okay,
and Jordan's predicting. So we're going to get into your rant here. So rant, is that what you want to do or no?
Actually, I know we're going to be tight on time. I'm going to leave my rant. Let's quickly talk some potential moves right now going on with we're hearing lots around the Flyers and Ottawa. Okay. Let's talk about that, and then let's get into the Stanley Cup final and wrap up our show.
Good.
So I'm going to leave the rant today. Let's get into it, man. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. So if you guys go follow our good friend Jamie Basco over at Flyers Nitty Gritty, you'll see that he's been talking a whole bunch of stuff. By the way, Jamie Basco, quit spreading these filthy rumors that you're going to get Leon Draisaitl. No way he's leaving Edmonton. I keep telling people him and McDavid want to play, and the only place they can afford both of them at the same time, because you'd have to get one year and then one the next year, and you're like, without tampering, how do you even do that, right? So anyway, but there is some connections. There is a belief system, and I believe Jamie even I had heard some rumblings already before Jamie, and so Jamie mentioned it, and so there is talk about a potential trade. Now Atkinson, by the way, likely a buyout this season. It sounds like a lot of talk around that. The other one, there's always been talk about connecting. Great player, but remember they're in a rebuild, and so would he want to go somewhere else? So there is talk that connecting could be a trade over to Ottawa. Ottawa wants to make some moves. They want to become relevant. They've been pushing for that. And there's a lot of talk about letting go of Chychrun, but they need salary. And believe it or not, two names that are out there is Branston and Shabbat. Shabbat's name is out there because of the salary he's containing, and he's not the player after his injury again. And a lot of players are like that after their injuries. So I wonder right now if there's something in the brewing, because Ottawa is on the phones consistently. A lot of sources are saying that. A lot of credible sources are saying that from different avenues. And so I really think that they're working to see if they can make something happen before the draft. That's your most powerful spot. But I wonder, hey, guys, throw us out. So what are some ideas for the Flyers for a good pick or a good one out there? And also, what about the Ottawa Senators? What should they be looking for? Like, should the Flyers be... I mean, who on the Flyers is going to be open? But listen, if they could get Chychrun or Shabbat or even Branston, could you imagine? That's going to help that blue line in Philly. And I think building that blue line, and there's a lot of talk that Mishkov could be over this year. So, I mean, who knows? This is going to be an incredible offseason coming up in this next week and a half.
Yep. And Konechny, Jordan says, is a former Ottawa 67, so he could potentially be linked to Ottawa. And I know that they're talking about defensemen. That's someone they can get rid of. Chychrun could be the odd man out after trying to go from Arizona. Utah, there's a lot of rumblings of what is Utah going to do. So keep an eye out for Utah. And Zylstra says the only way Draisaitl, not Drysdale as it's spelled, is if his new extension comes under 14 per. Now, my understanding is the reporting is that there's two contracts set for both players, McDavid and Draisaitl, and they're ready to essentially sign off on it come July 1st for Draisaitl, at least for this year. And next year it would be for McDavid. And I think you're going to see both of them stay, even if it is for the next 4 to 5 years. But I think my understanding is that they're both long-term contracts because they want to win, and they're 2 games away from winning their first Stanley Cup ever. So it'll be interesting to see what takes place. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and even if they don't, and this is a perfect slide over to talk Oilers Panthers here, final Stanley Cup before we wrap. Even if they don't win the cup here, say they win one more game or they don't win another game, you still got 2 guys hungry. There's not many places you're going to have spent to the cap where you got other developing players. You got a good supporting group around you. They can just do nothing but get better. So Draisaitl with it. The only difference that Pavel and I have, Pavel thinks you'll get him cheaper. I think it'll be more expensive. I believe Pavel's talking around the 12. And
yeah, that's what Jordan says too. 12.
Yeah, and I'm talking around the 13.5, I think, that you're dealing with on this. So, but
you can't go up that much, and you need space to make room for other players. You can't just have no one else around it.
Yeah,
here's
but
the big one. If they don't,
you don't worry about that. You got the best players in the game.
Agreed.
You have no choice. You do not mess around with that if you want to keep them.
Agreed, but then you have to look at your current contracts, and like you saw, you look at someone like a Nurse.
You pay to let them go. You unload other players that are supporting cast that are good.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. You let go of a defenseman like a Nurse making 9.25.
Yeah.
Throw it out there.
So yeah, that's a good point. So, and we'll talk about that more in the next 2 weeks, guys, as we walk around. So next week, just again, thanks to the Bar Down Beauties, thanks to Jessica for coming on. Guys, give them a follow. Go fund me them. They're on Tuesday nights. Check them out. Before we go into Stanley Cup Final, I just didn't want to forget talking about them. As well as next week, we're going to talk draft and any trades and things around that because it's all heating up around that. And by the way, my rant was going to be, and let's talk about it next week, because I want to rant that the fact that players can be traded before the finals are even done right now, the way they set things up this year. And I want to talk about that. I'll rant about that next week. Right now, playoffs are going on. We know, guys, it's no secret. If you go to our X feeds, if you go to our Facebook pages, we are in Edmonton, so we have a bias towards Edmonton, but we do everything we can to be able to not have that bias and look at this. When you're talking about reffing, when you're talking in the middle of a game, we're all biased towards your team. However, we understand hockey and we understand the game. And whatever happens, if the Oilers get beat, the Panthers deserve this series just because they come back. I want to say that up front. They remind me a lot of the New York Islanders of the late 70s, early 80s. That's what Panthers remind me of. It is a good, hard fought. They've kept it more interesting to me than last year's Stanley Cup finals were a joke between Vegas and Florida. There was not exciting hockey. There was like periods of hockey, whereas this has been exciting and it's been drama everywhere. But all I can say, why would Matthew Tkachuk, let's talk now. Why would Matthew Tkachuk give fodder and start talking like they're going to win on home ice, make it like he's pulling a Messier, and just talking about they're not about one individual player or individual players? Why would you give that food for people to feed on, to come against you, and more motivation outside of what Florida's already done? Is that not a stupid move by Matthew Tkachuk?
I do. I think the problem is that people get so riled up and heated, and the fan bases get so excited during this time that they really commit to being like believing that this is their year, this is their team, and rightfully so. Florida 1 win away from the glorious Lord Stanley. Oilers 2 wins away, right? So really since 1990 for the Oilers and first time ever for the Panthers. They are living, breathing it. They are excited. They are getting butts in seats, and they are trying to be the best fan base ever and support their guys. Matthew Tkachuk playing up the role. He knows what he is. And actually, Evan, prior to yesterday's game, he's been kind of met in this series. Now, he has scored in other series, but he's been kind of, I don't want to say invisible because he has made an impact. But he comes up with a big goal yesterday, saves that open net, even though unfortunately it didn't end up as he wanted to because Oliver Ekman
But he played with hard
skating.
work.
But he played with hard work.
Yeah.
He came out. He was battling. He was emotional on the ice. He brought the Matthew Tkachuk game, and he was trying to be competitive. Yeah. Now, the series is not over, but as Jordan says, you're telling me there's a chance. There is always a chance for an opportunity to do this. The one fun fact that I thought that I would just share is that first they went, Florida's going to sweep Edmonton. Well, that didn't happen. Well, then they're going to blow an 8-1 lead at home, which I found it hard to believe, so that they can win at home. So now all the comments that I've seen on Twitter or X is, well, actually, they want to win at home, but it's in Game 7. We just misunderstood the spelling of what it is. So really, I mean, fan bases are excited. Oilers, it's never happened in the history. I get it. You're excited. You're saying Oilers in 7 and you got to lose first 3. I get it. It seems like a really weird, brain way of thinking, but sure. It's been fun, Evan. And I think I read today that it was 8.7 million viewership, the highest rated ever for the playoffs yesterday. Come on. Like, how wild is that? You've seen those crowds both at the Florida arena and in the Oilers arena, vice versa, especially with the away games, with the watch parties and outside the arenas. Yeah. This has been a phenomenal playoffs, and I look forward to a wild barn on Friday in Edmonton.
It's crazy. I will say this, that, and this is all fairness because there's less Florida people that you're going to have on social media and stuff. It is interesting. And Oiler fans, I said this early on, be careful about being cocky. You guys got really quiet when you were down 2-0. Yeah, you're positive, but you can't keep essentially shit talking and just saying all this stuff. And then even now it's like, we're going to win it all because you look stupid after. Like, be positive. Say, yeah, no, I think we're going to do it. But why talk down? And I guess that's one thing that I'm finding weird is why do you want to talk down and rip apart the other team when just build up your own team? You can be positive. You can believe they can come back because of this and this. Same with Panthers fans. I've just seen it during that piece. And I say, whatever happens, Panther fans, Oilers fans, whoever wins this, whoever loses this, be better than those around you that don't know or understand respect in hockey. Sportsmanship. Yeah. You can be down and sad, but appreciate, man. your teams have gone to the very, very end and last game of the year. They've made it interesting. Enjoy it, and do not go start fires and flip cars. In fact, if you see people, report them right away, because we know they're a bunch of drunk idiots anyway. So,
my one critique is that there was some Florida Panthers at the first two home games in Florida at Amalie Arena.
I can't hear you. Get quiet.
Sorry. I was saying, Zilstra says the best final for over the last 10 years. I was going to say that there were some fans at the first two home games in Florida that fans were booing while the Canadian national anthem was being sung. That was just uncalled for. There's no need for that. And I've seen on Florida posts like, hey, don't do that, guys. Be better. Be respectful, regardless of what anthem it is. Don't do that. And I think that's one thing that I would say. Come on, it's a time where you can just be respectful, take off your hat, stand up, and honor those who have served us.
Exactly.
That's my
hey, final thoughts, bud. We got to call it a wrap. Let me give you my final thought. Anthems. Okay. You just hit on them. Last night's game in Florida, they can't sing "O Canada" properly. They still mess it up and have it. They're off. It's pitchy. Their own anthem, they were pitchy. Come on, Florida. If it comes back there for a seventh game, hire somebody else different. Make sure that they're pitch perfect. Spend the money on a superstar singer and play this thing out like you can. Enjoy it, but, please don't have any of these horrendous singers, or otherwise just skip it and tell the TV not to play it for us, because I'm getting so sick of bad singers.
That's an amazing thought. All I'm going to say is I expect to see Shania Twain in the building going crazy because that H1 slacking, she clearly is good luck charm. But no, it's been a fun ride. I do not like the fact that this has been drawn out for so long, and the fact that we're already getting trades, and the draft is coming up here next week. But really, Evan, it's been fun. Good luck on Friday and potentially on Monday if there's a game. And let's see the next 2024 Stanley Cup champion. And we'll be talking all about it next week on Two Guys and Hockey Talk. We are here every Wednesday.
As well, we will be showing our first official release video for my Revs Top 15. She's ready to go.
Oh, Jordan's final comment is Florida booing all the Canadian players on their team as well. I mean, yeah, you have quite a few Canadian players there, so I don't understand why this is going to be a thing. So, thanks, guys, once again, for tuning in to Two Guys and Hockey Talk every Wednesday. Thank you, Jesse, for coming on and sharing your thoughts on all things Minnesota Wild and Minnesota sports. We appreciate it. We love having you guys. Remember to like, share, subscribe. Check it out on Twitter or X at Rev and Ev, or myself at hockey_2. We are on Facebook. We are on YouTube. Go subscribe. We have a website, twoguysandhockeytalk.com. Go check it out. We tried to get articles. It's been a little quieter in the last little bit, but we're hoping to get back up to it once the fall starts. And once again, we appreciate you tuning in. We love hearing from all you guys. You are all amazing. Thank you. Any last thoughts, Evan?
Man, it's been a ring-a-ding-dong dandy in the famous words of the great Ed Whaling. But in the meantime, and in between time,
keep your sticks on the ice till the end of the buzzer.
Cheers. Could that just put him over the edge?
I'm not too sure. I don't think they did well.
He's a bully.
I'm just so sick and tired. I'm hanging on a wire, a foot over the fire, and it's burning. I can feel it inside. Done with the same cliche. Done with the day after day. There's got to be a way. Now is the time to break the tie. I'll live, I'll die for what is wrong and what is right. I'll take the pain for all the ones without a name. To be invincible, we'll be invincible.
They still have a lot of holes to fill.